wonderful. Okay, all right. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
You all are so wonderful. You all are so wonderful.
I'm just relieved with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
Yeah.
All right, this is the
Okay.
beginning of this section.
Okay, and then data. Okay, cool. Sounds good. So should I turn mine over when I finish?
Yes.
Okay.
Friends, I want to encourage you to move to your seats as quickly as you can, in that we are having a broadcast, and the broadcast was supposed to begin about 10 minutes ago. So it would be helpful if you might find your seats more quickly. I might mention that there will be plenty of time for greetings and conversations after we conclude. There will be treats and goodies and things in the foyer. So if you might hold your conversation so that we could get underway sooner than later, that would be very much appreciated. Again, we are going to be joined this evening by what amounts to be many thousands on a live broadcast, so better to start sooner than later. We'll wait just another, let's give it 2 minutes. We have a countdown. This has been a week for countdowns. We'll give it just another minute. I count minutes rapidly. All right. Friends in the broadcast booth, we are going to begin. Aloha, dear friends. I have the great delight to welcome you on behalf of our National Spiritual Assembly to what is surely to be a joyful commemoration of the life of our dear Baha'i brother, Glenford Mitchell, who was such a driving, inspiring force for so many of us who are gathered in this room this evening. If you were to measure a life of greatness by how many people love you, admire you, who hold you as an example of devoted service, the life of our dear brother Glenford Mitchell could not be appraised. There would be no measure for such a life. In lead up to this evening, there has been much attention given to the Artemis II moonshot. And the commentaries have been that we have gone farther than we have ever gone before. We have had a view of the life on this planet and the backside of the moon from places from angles and perspectives we've never been before. But our ambassador astronauts have returned, and if you saw their commentary, have returned with the powerful conviction of the oneness of humanity, the oneness of our home on this planet. There's a resonance here, to my mind, a resonance with the life of our dear Baha'i brother, Glenford Mitchell. When he would speak, when you had quality time with him, as so many of us in this room had, particularly as Baha'i youth, he took you farther than you've ever been in your understanding and appreciation of the revelation of Baha'u'lláh. He gave you insight and perspective that you'd never seen before. And he brought you home with a conviction of the oneness, this great organizing principle of life on this planet, the oneness of the human family, with great conviction and assurance that we had the path to achieve it. Such was one of his manifold services to this faith. Friends, we have a distinguished list of guests from far and wide, from every manner of service to this faith here tonight. And I think it's a testament to our dear Baha'i brother that there should be such a distinguished list of guests, of whom you are all included, of course. But among those guests are his family members. This would be Bahia Mitchell, well known to so many of us, Teresa Mitchell, his daughter, Emma Rowe, his sister, and her husband, David. We have representing the Continental Board of Counselors, Nazanin Ho. We have from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Hawaii, Mr. Ed Young. We have from the National Spiritual Assembly of Jamaica, Walter Scott. We have from the International Board of Trustees of the Hukuk'u'lláh, Bill Wheaties and his wife Lynn. We have former members of the House of Justice, Mr. Kaiser Barnes, Gustava Kostova Korea and his wife Haleh Arbab. We have Mr. Fariadun Javahari and his wife Vida, who are also representing the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Canada. We have a former ITC member, that's International Teaching Center member, Penny Walker, and her husband David. We have former Continental Board of Counselors members, Farzeen Agdasi, Eugene Andrews and his wife Nancy. We have Todd Ewing, who's also a former member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, and Billy Roberts, also a former member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, and his wife Betty. We also have distinguished members of the former members of the National Spiritual Assembly, Joanna Conrad and her husband Sam, Bill Davis, Robert Henderson. So friends, we will begin with the reading of condolences from our House of Justice, and that will be read by National Spiritual Assembly member Rabi Musa. We will then have the reading of condolence from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, read by Tim Conley, followed by letters from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Hawaiian Islands, read by Ed Young, and finally, the letter from the National Spiritual Assembly of Jamaica, read by Walter Scott. So, Rabi Musa, would you come forward?
Good evening, friends. This letter is dated February 10th, 2026, to Dr. Bahia Mitchell. The actual letter is dated 8th February. From the Universal House of Justice to all National Spiritual Assemblies. The passing of Glenford E. Mitchell from this earthly plane robs the Baha'i world of an illustrious, accomplished, deeply spiritual servant of Baha'u'lláh. We mourn the loss of our dearly loved former colleague with sorrowful hearts, calling to mind his penetrating powers of insight and uncommon good sense, to which he harnessed his compelling command of language, a combination of rare qualities that answered to so many demands during his membership of the Universal House of Justice. This period, stretching for more than a quarter century, crowned a lifetime of service and followed 14 years in which he held the office of Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States. During his life, his gifts of character, skill, and understanding served him well as a journalist, an author, and an inspirational educator of youth. From an early age, his heart and mind were galvanized by the writings of the beloved guardian and the vision they encapsulated of a new world order founded on justice and operating according to the cardinal principle of the oneness of humanity. To this bright vision, enshrined in the revelation of Baha'u'lláh, he dedicated his entire life. We offer our condolences to his dear wife Bahia and his daughter Teresa for their loss, and we assure them of our supplications that this noble soul may receive a joyous welcome in the eternal realm. The friends throughout the world are called upon to hold befitting memorial gatherings in his honor, including in every house of worship, the Universal House of Justice.
Alapa, dear friends. National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, letter dated February 10th, 2026, to Dr. Bahia Mitchell. Dearest Bahia, the National Spiritual Assembly conveys to you its heartfelt condolences as you mourn the passing of your cherished husband and distinguished partner in service to the cause of God, Glenford E. Mitchell. We extend our deepest sympathies to your beloved daughter, Teresa, to Glenford's entire extended family, to his legion of friends and loved ones, and to all those he mentored and inspired across the globe. The myriad roles Glenford carried out in his service to the advancement of the Baha'i faith in this country will leave a lasting and noble legacy. As chair of the local Spiritual Assembly of Washington, D.C., as director of the National Department of Youth Activities at the Baha'i National Center, as a member of the National Teaching Committee, and finally, as secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly from 1968 to 1982. Generations to come will reflect with awe and admiration of his sterling qualities of mind and heart, with which he helped to shepherd this Baha'i community through a critical period. The latter years of the Civil Rights Movement, mass teaching, and entry into the cause of thousands of young Americans, the Iranian Revolution, and the welcoming of refugees to our shores. To name but a few of the significant developments that were unfolding, and to develop new administrative systems to address these many challenges. During these same years, he devoted his prodigious literary and intellectual talents to helping others, both within and outside the Baha'i community. To explore a range of profound issues, these included the unique features and potentials of Baha'i administration, the implications in the Baha'i teachings for the emergence of racial justice in this country, and the processes that will lead to the establishment of world peace. He then served for the next 26 years as a member of the Universal House of Justice, where he touched countless lives, especially the youth. With his penetrating insight, encouragement, and humor, and keen understanding of the sacred writings and their meaning for humanity, we hope that you, Teresa, and all of Glenford's loved ones may draw comfort from the knowledge that the friends the world over are offering prayers for the eternal progress of his radiant soul in the paradise of all delights. The National Assembly will also offer ardent prayers for your solace in your time of loss. With tender Baha'i love, Kenneth E. Bowers, Secretary.
Aloha. All right. To the family of Mr. Glenford E. Mitchell from the Baha'is of the Hawaiian Islands. Dearly loved friends, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the Hawaiian Islands extend its heartfelt condolences to Dr. Bahia Mitchell, beloved wife of 53 years, and to their daughter, Dr. Teresa Mitchell, upon the passing of Mr. Glenford E. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell's tremendous qualities of heart and mind were described by the beloved Universal House of Justice soon after his passing. His character, skill, and understanding are an abiding inspiration to us all, and his life stands as a luminous example of what it means to serve with both devotion and distinction. We in Hawaii hold a particular tender gratitude in our hearts for both devotion and distinction. During his years of service as Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, he extended his brilliance and care to assist our National Assembly in assuring a befitting Baha'i burial of the beloved hand of the cause of God, Agnes Baldwin Alexander, whose befitting Baha'i burial remains rested in her Idaho home. The challenges we faced in ensuring she be allowed a distinguished burial in accordance with Baha'i law were indeed tumultuous, but with the onrushing waves of divine assistance, all barriers were lifted. It was quite miraculous. Mr. Mitchell's timely act of selfless service, characteristic of his devotion and attentiveness, created a bond of gratitude between him and the people of Hawaii that will eternally carry with us. The Hawaii Baha'i community is offering prayers for the soaring progress of the soul of dear Mr. Mitchell and the souls of his bereaving family. I offer this prayer from Abdu'l. O thou pure and omnipotent God, O thou my kind Lord, grant me such power as to enable me to withstand the onslaught of the peoples and the kindreds of the world, and give me such might as to cause the waves of my endeavor, like unto the Pacific Ocean, to reach the shores of both east and west. Abdu'l. We are indeed grateful for Mr. Mitchell. Allah Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, friends. This is a tribute from the National Spiritual Assembly of Jamaica. The call of God for service to humanity falls on every willing soul, irrespective of that person's place of birth, infant nurture, or status in life. The annals of our faith are replete with glorious examples of willing souls answering God's call to service. One such example, the source of our presence here this evening, is Glenford Eccleton Mitchell. Glenford Mitchell was born in the small village of Brighton, in the parish of St. Elizabeth, in the county of Cornwall, in the island of Jamaica. A very small village in a small island. He was born on the 3rd of March, 1935. He was the eldest of 10 children. Ernell, who is now deceased, Mervyn, Eileen, who's also affectionately called Joy, Bernard, who is now deceased, Delvin, Hector, Emma, who is here this evening along with her husband, Glanville, and Sarita, who's also affectionately called Kay. At the age of 3, he was taken from Brighton to Kingston, the capital, by his paternal uncle, Wellesley Arthur William Mitchell, known as W.A.W. Mitchell, or Uncle Mitch, who was the first Jamaican male to declare his belief in Bahá'u'lláh, the messenger of God for this day. And this was in 1942. He grew up in the home of W.A.W. Mitchell in Kingston and was raised by him and benefited from his guidance. He attended primary and secondary schools in Kingston, and under the watchful guidance of Uncle Mitch, he attended Baha'i children's classes, which Uncle Mitch held at his office. He grew up with a strong sense of self, that he was created noble. At the age of 15, which as you all know, in the Baha'i faith is the age of spiritual maturity, he declared his recognition of Bahá'u'lláh as the manifestation of God for this day. Through his senior teenage years into early adulthood, he, along with some of his closest friends, Roxroy Edwards and Hopetoun Fitzhenley, who were also Baha'i youth, both studied and taught the faith throughout the length and breadth of Jamaica. All of this was taking place in the pre-independence era in Jamaica, when in the aftermath of the Second World War, there was a growing sense of identity. In January 1957, just shy of his 22nd birthday, Glenford Mitchell traveled out of Jamaica to Raleigh, North Carolina, in the United States, to pursue a double major in English and business at Shaw University, one of the historically black universities in this country. The scholastic, religious, and moral foundations laid in Jamaica became the platform for development and maturity in these United States of America. He threw himself wholeheartedly into school life. He maintained a position on the honor roll. He served as editor of the Shaw Journal. He served as a member of the student legislature. He helped plan and present at civil rights conferences, all while having articles published in the Carolinian, a newspaper serving the African American community. He was closely involved in the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he was recognized in the who's who among students in American universities and colleges. He was, at the same time, active in the Baha'i community in Raleigh, North Carolina. He often gave talks or was visible at Baha'i events. He was a part of the first local spiritual assembly of Raleigh, and at one time was elected as its chairman. He graduated from Shaw University in 1960 and then pursued a master's degree at Columbia University School of Journalism. Professionally, he wrote, he edited, and he taught. He served the faith with all of his being, wherever he was resident, in North Carolina, in New York, in Washington, D.C., wherever. In 1968, a mere 11 years after first putting his feet on the soil of this great country, he was elected to the United States National Spiritual Assembly. In 1982, in a by-election, he was first elected to the Universal House of Justice. He served on the Universal House of Justice for 26 years, retiring in 2008 at the age of 73. Although he never set out to do so or to be so, he quietly became a huge example to us all in general and to us in Jamaica in particular, of humility, of service to the faith, commitment, and dedication. to his family present this evening, to Bahia, his dear wife, Teresa, his daughter, Emma, his sister, and her husband David, and the family extended throughout the entire world. Do accept the sincere condolences of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Jamaica. May his soul receive a joyous welcome in the eternal realm. Allahu Akbar, friends.
Next, friends, we'll have 4 remembrances of our dear brother Glenford Mitchell, and they will be from persons who have known him in quite distinct ways. First, we will hear from Robert Henderson, who also served as the Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of this country for many years, whom I've heard him say on multiple occasions. He referred to Glenford as the real Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly. His daughter, Teresa Mitchell, followed by Eugene Andrews, former counselor, and Mr. Kaiser Barnes, former member of the House of Justice. And that will be followed by a video that our National Spiritual Assembly has produced on the life of Glenford Mitchell, followed by further remembrances. But Robert Henderson.
Friends, it is virtually impossible for me to express everything in my heart about Glenford Mitchell. David was exactly right. I never regarded myself as the Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly. I always thought of myself as a stand-in for a person without whom I would not even be standing here this evening. I wanted to make a couple of comments about the impact of his life, both in my case and with the generation of Black youth especially. And I wanted to note that when the Universal House of Justice announced with sorrowful hearts the loss of their former colleague, they called attention to some of his many outstanding qualities. They referred to him as deeply spiritual, as possessing penetrating powers of insight and uncommon good sense, to which he harnessed the compelling power of language. We all remember so many of the wonderful letters he wrote that just rallied our hearts to a new level of devotion and understanding of the cause of Baha'u'lláh. But I want to point out that the House of Justice said that these qualities, rare qualities, they called them, answered so many of the demands during his membership of the Universal House of Justice, and that none of these qualities would have been expected of a Black boy born in the midst of the Great Depression in an undeveloped town which had served as a major center of the British slave trade, and the culture of which was still dominated by the legacy of slavery and the assumption of the inherent inequality of Black human beings. That one of his great accomplishments was that when Glenford Mitchell gave his heart to Baha'u'lláh, he exercised that sovereignty that God has given all of his children, the right to choose what we believe. Glenford chose to believe that he had been created rich. He chose to believe that he was noble, that he was created out of the essence of knowledge and molded by the clay of love. He chose to believe that his obligation to Bahá'u'lláh was to forge disciplined habits of thought, disciplined habits of the heart, and disciplined habits of behavior that were consistent with the teachings of Bahá'u'lláh. And he did this so assiduously that we thought of him as a person who surely must have had some aristocratic origin, because everything about him gave evidence to a kind of aristocratic nobility that we seldom see in any human being. And yet what was distinctive about Glenford Mitchell was that he made himself into this noble soul that we loved and admired so much. Glenford told me at one point that he never mastered the skill of speed reading. He said that for him, he had to labor and just grind through the enormous amount of text that was a part of his entire life. But I often wondered if that was not a blessing in disguise, because his willingness to do the work, to develop penetrating understandings of the cause of Baha'u'lláh and its teachings, to develop such a masterful command of the vision of Shoghi Effendi, to whom he was totally devoted, and who he talked about with a fluency that elevated all of our understandings of the vision of the Guardian. It was this willingness to approach such a large and magnificent task with such discipline that I believe was one of his great distinctions. He was also one of the most discreet human beings I had ever known. It was commonly said that Glenn did not tell his secrets even to God. And I will recall on many occasions asking him for advice. As a member of the Universal House of Justice, and I was serving as secretary, and I was frequently lost, bereft of discernment, and just trying to find my way. And I would say, well, you know, what is your understanding of this and that and the other? And every single time, year after year, what he would tell me is something the House had written, the Guardian had written, Abdu'l had written, or Baha'u'lláh had written. But never would he say, well, this is what I think. And it always called me to remember that the organization of our thought begins there, not with our private opinions, but with the truth writ large by Baha'u'lláh, by the Master, and by the Sign of God on earth, the Guardian. He was a sterling example of consistency in that regard. He was also, as has been noted, a model for youth. Now, in 1968, when Glenford Mitchell was elected to the National Spiritual Assembly and elected their secretary, there were a number of young black male Baha'is, and I was one of them, who were filled with the spirit of the age. That was a time of great change in the United States, and we were simultaneously filled with hope and rage. Hope that the power of Baha'u'llah's revelation would change things and set our people free, set all people free, and rage because it was so slow. And some of our activities, let me describe them as perhaps inconsistent with the framework for action and the vision of society building. But the National Spiritual Assembly was patient and wise and invited us, young folks, I was at that age where I was possessed with confidence that I knew everything that mattered. And and my colleagues, who were also summoned by the National Spiritual Assembly to that weekend, we were all of one faith. If it's important, we understand it. And the National Spiritual Assembly invited us to come and spend a weekend with its members. And they listened patiently as we complained about the Baha'i community, and we complained about the slowness of change, and we complained about discrimination and the oppression of black people in the United States, and we complained about a lack of access to everything, and just poured out our hearts. And they listened with a kind of attention that bespoke love and care for us, but they didn't say very much at all. And then gradually, when our cups were empty, and I'm talking about maybe 2 days of expressions of concern about this and that, they began to talk about the vision of Shoghi Effendi. And of course, Glenford Mitchell and Firuz Kazemzadeh were the principal champions of the articulation of that vision. And they began to help us understand the enormous challenge of society building in the age of the world order of Baha'u'lláh. And gradually, we began to feel a kind of spiritual change. And that spiritual change was so profound that when that meeting was over, I had come from my residence in California. I never went back. I left every single thing I owned. My car, all my clothes, anything that I possessed, I don't know what happened to it. Because I had been so transformed by this vision that I realized that that life had nothing to do with the life that Baha'u'lláh had called us to live. And the convincing of my heart that that was true was principally Glenford Mitchell, because we saw in Glenn evidence that this was all true. And this persisted for years. And so all of us, none of us had fathers, all of us were poor, all of us were full of confusion and hope and anger and all kinds of things. But we looked at Glenford and we would listen carefully to everything he said. And then we would have little debriefings. And we would say, did you see how he answered this question or that question? We would look at his letters and break them down and try to understand exactly how he had approached a complex idea, because we were looking for a way to live in the world. We were looking for a way to be fully human, and we saw in him an example of a person just like us who had found the path to the fulfillment of his human and spiritual potential, and we wanted to walk that path. And so we followed him assiduously and consistently, looked at everything he said and did, and used it as a starting point for trying to mold our own selves. It is quite literally true that were it not for Glenford Mitchell, I wouldn't be standing here this evening. And so many of us, Leonard Smith and Smitty and Richard Thomas, and so many people are in the very same category. And I want to say one last thing. As you know, Glenford had a catastrophic illness, and it stilled the right hemisphere of his body. So he was no longer able to write, and that beautiful articulation that so characterized him for so many years was silenced. Now, thank God, he was clear of mind and his spirit was radiant. But the point that I want to make is that during that period of 13 or 14 years of decreasing ability to move around, no ability to talk beyond hi and laughing and very brief responses, and a real desire to say what was in his heart, but no ability to get it out of his mouth. He demonstrated that phrase that is in the prayer for the departed. We are all verily patient in God. And what I want to point out was that over those years, when I would enter the home of Bahia and Glenford Mitchell, it was a home of joy. It was not a home of illness or incapacity. It was a home that was eager to hear the news of the faith. It was a home that was full of laughter. It was a home that was full of a rich love that embraced everyone. It was a home of eagerness and excitement about life. Bahia, Glenford once told me that he believed that you were a gift sent to him by angels in heaven. And all of us who had the privilege of being with you during that period know that you were certainly an angel to him. So much love, so much insistence on a full life, so much spiritual resilience. And we took this as, I took it, and my wife Paula took it, as a further lesson in how we must be. God ordaineth what he chooseth, and what recourse have we? And yet he asks us to be joyful in times of plenty and grateful in times of adversity. That was not only the spiritual approach that Glenford took to his illness, but it was also the atmosphere that permeated their home. I also wanted to say that as fathers do, we often talked about our children. And Teresa, he could not have loved you more or been greater in his admiration for who you have become and how you live your life. And all of us who know you just a little bit know that there are so many of his qualities in your heart. And we are so grateful that through you, we remain close to him. Lastly, there is a passage in the writings that says, "Beware, O people of Baha, lest the strong ones of the earth rob you of your strength, or they who rule the world fill you with fear. Put your trust in God and commit your affairs to his keeping. He will verily, through the power of truth, render you victorious. And he verily is powerful to do what he willeth, and in his grasp are the reins of omnipotent might. Glenford Mitchell devoted his life to the truth of this verse, and his life was a testament to its power.
Even as his child, how can I follow that? I want to express gratitude to the National Spiritual Assembly for this wonderful event and to all of you for being here. And it's a great blessing to be at the House of Worship to honor my father. But this is also one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because here is where we started as a family. And so being back here to do this is surreal. My parents got married across the street in the simplest of unphotographed ceremonies before the Wilmette LSA. And then my whole life, from ages 0 to 6, happened on Sheridan Road. Birth, school, the pediatrician, you name it, all within these few blocks. With Dad holding my hand, I tested out early steps on the sidewalk here. And sometimes Aunt Mag Carney, who really was part of our family, would wave at us from the window at 121 Linden. So this is home with too many memories, all bittersweet. Dad appreciated dignity and simplicity, as you've gathered, and he didn't like palaver, so here's hoping that I can illustrate a few small aspects of his indelible influence on his child's life in a way that pleases him. About a year after Dad's election to the House of Justice, Mom and I joined him in Haifa in time for me to start first grade. I was thrilled to be near the holy shrines and enjoyed the unique wildlife on the Carmel mountainside, but was scandalized by everything else, really. In no small part because Dad and I stood out like sore thumbs in a country that hadn't seen many Black people by that point. I very quickly grew weary of the situation. One day, just a few months into my time in Haifa, as we entered a neighborhood store, kids flanked each side of the door, staring and pointing. Look at them. I decided I'd had enough, thank you very much. And since I was at eye level with them, I stuck out my elbows to plow through the small group. But my intentions were foiled as I felt Dad's hands calmly pushing my arms down from behind and leading me through the door. Yes, he'd been a student activist for civil rights. Yes, he'd co-authored a volume entitled The Angry Black South. But there it was, the first of many lessons to take the higher road and remember who I was, someone with a choice. That making a point was not some tit-for-tat game, that sometimes the absence of retort spoke loudest. In the middle of high school, I transferred to an American school, and culture shock began all over again. But one of the things I really loved about that school was the dimensions we explored in literature. We hadn't taken that route in my previous Israeli school, so I felt like some tunnel had opened in my mind. It was like I was finally beginning to understand some things about the world. So imagine my surprise when I learned that a group of parents were asking to have certain books removed from our required reading list. They wanted us to, in their words, read something beautiful like Shakespeare, instead of the presumably degraded literature we were consuming from the modern American canon. You get my gist. I fumed to Dad, a man of literature. He'd studied journalism, edited publications, and taught English at the university level. We had a laugh about the Shakespeare plays he'd read to me in my younger years with their beautiful themes of murder and intrigue. Don't get me started on Chaucer. Dad picked up his pen. He addressed a letter to the school, got up in front of a parent-teacher meeting, and read it emphatically to the crowd. I wish I had it to read to you today, but the gist was that depriving young minds of this literature, these avenues to explore important ideas within the safety of a learning environment, would leave us less prepared for life. Do not get me wrong. Dad always emphasized the very high moral standard called for in the faith, including how this standard applied to youth. But he wanted me to be clear that observing that high moral standard did not mean disengaging from the world and blinding ourselves to its sometimes ugly truths. Far from it. He explained to me that there's no way any one person can have every experience in life, the implication being that literature and art are one way to deepen one's capacity to analyze, empathize, and understand. Speaking of art and artists, Dad certainly was in that camp. While his tool of choice was the pen, you would often find him crouching in front of some tree or shrub, taking close-up camera shots. He's not in many of our family photos because he was always behind the camera, so enjoy the few you may see here tonight. His artistic bent, I'm sure, opened my eyes and ears to visual and sonic experiences, the things that add dimension and richness and hold up a mirror to the world. Finally, I would be remiss if in this magnificent and symbolic edifice, I did not mention the subject of America. Because my dad actively chose this place, the United States, even though he came here during civil rights era tumult as the nation grappled with basic human rights issues. And despite all the follies and foibles that have occurred since, and many of which are yet to come, no doubt, I just think he'd want us to remember the long haul, that America will reach its spiritual destiny as envisioned in the writings. Thank you for being here and indulging a daughter.
Allow upon, dear friends. It is certainly an honor to be able to share some reflections on Mr. Glenford Mitchell, and very grateful to Bahia and Teresa for giving me this opportunity. I knew Glenford as a friend and mentor, and I'd like to share some reflections based upon that. So it's going to be a little bit extemporaneous and hopefully a little bit lighthearted, because I want to speak and reflect on Glenford, the man, as great as his accomplishments were, and as a wonderful human being as he was a dear friend. He was a dear friend who loved to cook. So it was wonderful to visit the Mitchells, and at first, once I recently arrived there, to see a member of the House of Justice cooking dinner for me and my wife, Nancy. It is also wonderful to gain a relationship with him based around his hobby and a hobby that I also have, which is photography. I happen to have two of his prints, one an abstract of bark, not the wolf bark, but bark on a tree. Also, a photograph of reflections of sailing boats nearby the House of Worship. I cherish having those. But it's important that I share with you how I ended up serving at the World Center and working principally for the House of Justice, and in particular, working very closely with Mr. Mitchell. So the question is, how did I get there? Well, and this is just my reflection, and don't put it in any Katabi hearsay or anything, it's just my experience. I kind of got the feeling that he had a clandestine operation taking place with some very special agents who knew about my background. I happened to work for a very large company, and I was in the arena of organization development and working with senior executives and so on. And I don't know how they got that information. I did have the opportunity to pen some letters and some reports to the Universal House of Justice. And one in particular had to do with organization behavior and functioning, and evidently that letter went to one of this clandestine operations head. I think his name was Guido. And so I wrote this letter about some organizational proposals that he was making, and I thought that was it. And then I was then on a national teaching committee. I was in a meeting, and then another one, I think, of his agents, a young man, very spiffy and silver-tongued young man, knocked on the door and interrupted our meeting. I think he was then secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly, and said that there's someone here to meet you from the World Center. And, wow, that's a surprise. It happened to be another one of his special agents. I think her name was Bahá'í or something like that. Actually, it was his very special agent who took on many tasks beyond just meeting with me. And so she came with this report and charts and graphs and job descriptions and everything. And so we talked about this new committee that was to be established at the World Center called the Planning Committee. And she went in very, very great detail, went through it. And then she says, this is the quality that we're looking for in someone to be the executive secretary of this committee. I said, well, yeah, that's really going to be something. And if I happen to see anybody with those qualities, I will certainly let you know about it. You know? So time passed, about a month or so. I was in my office. By the way, I was working for a very large company, and the programs that I was running there were executive development programs. And on occasion, because these people that I was training were on the fast track for senior leadership in the company, the CEO would come to our institute to meet, as a class, this group is some 35 executives. And so it was not unusual for him to come by and pay a visit. So I was in the office, and as I could see out of my office the helicopter pad that we had there. And about that time, as I was gazing out at the office, my secretary says, Gene, you have a call from Haifa, Israel. What? Okay. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it. Yeah, didn't get a call from Haifa, Israel every day. Actually, it was the first one. And so, and he says, Gene, this is Glenford. Can we talk right now? Do you have a minute? And so as he was saying that, I looked up, and here comes the helicopter with the CEO of the company. And I had to say, I'm sorry, sir, but not right now. You know, mind if I call you later? And he's very kind. He said, sir, please call back. At your convenience. Well, I didn't want to have him wait, and so I was with that group and the CEO until about, I guess, 6, 7 o'clock U.S. time. But I still had in my mind, I must call Haifa. And so I don't know exactly when I called, but I'm sure I woke up Bahia because it must have been about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning Haifa time. You know. And so this is Gene. And you wouldn't think that he was sleepy or anything. He was prompt. And so we chatted a bit. And that's when he informed me that he says to me, Gene, are you ready for a change in your life? And I didn't know what he had in mind. But I soon find myself on a plane going to Haifa for an interview and so on. And the rest is history. But I share that story with you because I did have the opportunity in my capacity on the planning committee to meet with him frequently and learn from him. He was my mentor. And yes, indeed, to his question, are you ready for a change in your life? Yes, he did bring about a change in my life. And for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the National Spiritual Assembly for giving me the honor to participate in the celebration of the life of Glenford Mitchell. I feel it's a great, great privilege to be able to speak about Glenford, and a great honor for me to be here. I've had requests to participate in memorial meetings in various parts of our country and states and forth. Just not able to do so, but I felt I had to be here to be able to speak of Glenford. And what I have said to some of the friends kind enough to invite me to participate in their local commemoration service, memorial services, that I feel that the greatest thing that could be said about Glenford Mitchell is in the message of the Universal House of Justice. And you might feel that it might merit some study of the qualities of Glenford Mitchell that the Universal House of Justice, the voice of God, has cited in its letter. Yes, I think it does require that. Here's one of the gifts of God, that the Universal House of Justice makes expressions that are so precious and priceless. Not just a reading, all is good, and we do the best we can, but some of these indications from the Universal House of Justice merit study. So much has been mentioned about the qualities the House of Justice has enumerated. And I think that the one quality that the House of Justice enumerates in its letter kind of summarizes or grounds all the other qualities. And that is where the House of Justice says that Glenford Mitchell was an illustrious, accomplished, a deeply spiritual servant of Bahá'u'lláh. And here's the voice of God speaking to us. Here's the voice of God telling the entire Baha'i world, Glenford Mitchell, a deeply spiritual servant of Bahá'u'lláh. I think you see the point. It's something that merits, in my view, deep reflection and consideration. I treasure that I was with him at the Baha'i World Center and times before. I benefited enormously from his gifts, as the House of Justice says, his gifts of character, skill, and understanding. And no wonder, I have told myself, no wonder I have benefited, because Baha'u'lláh himself has revealed the light of a good character surpasses the light of the sun. And here's how I think of Glenford Mitchell when the House of Justice says he had good character. Here's the voice of God speaking. And much of what the House of Justice has cited takes us back to the writings to see where Baha'u'lláh himself says the light of a good character surpasses the light of the sun. Whoso arises in this day to aid our cause with praiseworthy character and upright conduct, the influence from such an action will be diffused throughout the whole earth. And we have seen some of this diffusion throughout the world in individuals of all backgrounds who have benefited from the services of Glenford Mitchell. I also love everything the National Spiritual Assembly has said about Glenford. Yes, he loved the National Spiritual Assembly. He loved America, you know. And often he would say, here's what happened in the 5th year, the 7-year plan. And here's what happened to the growth of the faith in America, the 2nd 7-year plan. He never got tired of speaking about the spiritual promise that lies in America. He was very happy. I know we smiled and hugged together in Haifa. He was very happy about the Southern teaching activities that occurred when he was the secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly. You know that great influx of new believers in the South who came into the faith. And I also can tell you he was very happy, as the House of Justice itself was so very happy at the Black Men's Gathering, that traveling teaching and pioneer and community building activity that Black men in our country rose up to carry into Africa and other parts of the world. He was very happy. And I tell you, when members of that traveling teaching team would come back on their way home, back home to America, and they would stop in the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, laughing and hugging and singing and rejoicing that they had the support of the Universal House of Justice, and the Universal House of Justice directed all of their movements and directed their activities. And Glenford was so very happy. And I can tell you all the members of the House of Justice were so very happy. And we had our time to be with them, hugging and laughing and having prayers together and singing and some drumming. And then the House of Justice members always have a little ways of teasing each other and making fun, you know. And sometimes we would say, Glenford, somehow those black men's gathering, they seem to be happier when they were with you. Sure, they were with Natravani, that was lovely. And they were with Kaiser, that was lovely. And they were with all the House members. But we would tease him to say, Glenford, they seem to be happier when they were with you. In other words, he was supporting the teaching effort coming out of America. He was supporting the fact that a group of believers in America at great sacrifice and great commitment to the cause, they had gone forward, making their services known. I have one other verse that I have been thinking about, and in these days of reflections that I know Glenford loved, our interactions, you know, the House of Justice having its prayers and members selecting prayers, and occasionally you'll get the appreciation that here's a particular prayer that a member of the Universal House of Justice is very fond of. And I have the impression that he was one that Glenford was very fond of, because in my view, it reflected so much what the House of Justice said about Glenford Mitchell, has told the world about Glenford Mitchell, a spiritual servant of Bahá'u'lláh. And that verse from Bahá'u'lláh is this one: cling, O people of Bahá'í, to the cord of servitude unto God, for thereby your station shall be made manifest, your names written and preserved, your ranks raised, and your memory exalted. So we're here this evening speaking about the memory of Glenford Mitchell and how it is exalted throughout the world, because he loved to serve the cause of God. He loved to raise consciousness among people. He loved to accompany people. Consciousness of the society-building power in the faith, the civilization-building power of the faith that Shoghi Effendi said. And he loved very much, as has been mentioned, what Shoghi Effendi has to say. And the House of Justice talked about his penetrating power of insight. The House of Justice called it his uncommon good sense. And wasn't it a good sense he had to turn first to the Word of God? Let us see what Baha'u'lláh has said. And let us see what Abdu'l has said. And let us see what Shoghi, isn't that the best good sense that we could think of? Well, Glenford had that good sense, as Bob Henderson has said so clearly. And the members of the House of Justice knew so clearly. He was a student of the faith. He was a very deep, deep student of the faith. He could put things in context, relationships, and he could give you verses and scriptures that was so wonderful. I come across this verse I thought to share. We're just looking at little affirmations, if you want to call it. The House of Justice has named some qualities. And that's excellent, isn't it? But you may think, oh, all right, if Baha'u'lláh speaks of those qualities, is even more excellent. And here's what Baha'u'lláh says: it is incumbent upon every man of insight and understanding to strive to translate that which have been written into reality and actions. So here we are, remembering Glenford for his insight, and this is a gift of God that he had. I first met Glenford here, right here in this hall, 50 years ago, 1976. Nancy and I, we decided that yes, we want to go pioneering. And we came here, and there was a Pioneer Institute here, you know, helping those who wish to pioneer to, you know, strengthen themselves and to go forward. We were 82 at that time, and I read someplace, I was looking at my notes, and I have the notes in my notes that yes, it was the largest group of pioneers who had come here for the Training Institute, and Glenford spoke there, and that's the place that I was first struck by the tremendous spiritual forces and the tremendous spiritual powers and the understanding of the writings. He spoke about pioneering in terms of the spiritual character of pioneering. He spoke of it in terms of following Baha'u'llah's direction. So I was a beneficiary 50 years ago, and from that time I have been a steady beneficiary of the spiritual service of Glenford. And someone has already spoken about heart and mind, and he loved it, had his mind, he dedicated his heart and mind. Yes, Teresa has spoken about his intellectual capacity, and that's one of the things that struck me so very much, his intellectual capacity. And that intellectual capacity always displayed with such humility, with such meekness, never to give any indication, look how smart I am. Look how well versed I am in the writings. So I always remember that I first met him here when I myself trying to find out the meaning of serving our faith more fully, the meaning of dedicating oneself. And I feel myself very fortunate to have come here 50 years ago, the National Spiritual Assembly organizing session for pioneers, those who wish to go pioneers, and Glenford Mitchell, one of the speakers, along with others. Mr. Zekrullah Kadim was one of the speakers. There were many others, but I was particularly moved. He had conversations. He would go around the room having conversations with those at the gathering. And in those conversations, one could feel that he was a man of insight and devotion. I was very much inspired by Glenford, and soon after that training session, Nancy and I were fortunate to find ourselves pioneers in Africa because of the inspiration we have often told ourselves. Because of the inspiration in the way of God, we had come here. First time I had visited the House of Worship. First time coming into Foundation Hall, and all of that coming together makes me at this time even more appreciative of those qualities that Glenford manifested. You have heard already comments about him coming up from Jamaica into Raleigh, North Carolina. That's where Nancy and I live today. Yes, leaving the Baha'i World Center, looking around for a nice place to pioneer in America. I'm from Baltimore, Nancy from Fort Worth, Texas. And we're looking around at the history of our faith. And we felt, yes, Raleigh seems like a good place. And it is a good place because the local spiritual assembly, as you have heard, he's the first chairman of the local spiritual assembly of Raleigh. And in so many ways, the spirit of Glenford Mitchell, I tell myself, when I go over to the campus of Shaw University, yes, and I go there often, and I have gone there and met the president of the university and spoken about Glenford Mitchell being a graduate there. She's no longer there, was the president. This goes back now 13 years ago, 12 or 13 years ago, when we first moved to Raleigh. But that was there, and his contributions, the spirit of his contribution. You see, I'm getting a little excited here, I back up. The spirit of his contributions is still there. And people, believers in our community, we remember. So I was always happy to be with Glenford there. Once I was with him in Haifa now. I was always happy. And we were in his office at Haifa, and we were remembering our childhoods, growing up years, chuckling and laughing. We appreciated the strengths of family bonds, family relationships, the values of cultural folklore, and our family's love and care for us, their hopes and aspirations for us, and for all their children. And then he was speaking of his parents, Hubert and Mabel Mitchell, and other relatives. And he suddenly said, "Kaiser, I want to show you something." He took from a file a photograph of him with his paternal uncle, William. Glenford was maybe 5 or 6 years old. He looked so noble, sharp, and assured, like he knew who he was in a spiritual sense, like he knew, young boy, like he knew that he and his uncle were helping to build a better world. And he spoke so very softly of his parents, and he spoke so very softly of his uncle and other relatives. The uncle had taught the Baha'i children's class. He had educated the young children in those classes in other ways. And all of them became teachers of the faith. These young children, like Glenford, they became teachings of the faith. And I felt myself, when he was speaking about mother and father and uncle and other relatives, I felt myself so honored. Even until today, I felt myself honored that he may have thought me such a friend, that he could speak of mother and father and uncle and other relatives, and how they planted the seed of serving the cause of God. As I said, he was speaking so softly about it. you know. I don't know if his eyes were wet, but mine were, you see, to think that he would share with me something so precious and important to him, family bond and cultural factors. Sometimes we would just sit together at Haifa, quietly aware of great religious, historical, and cultural developments. Sometimes we walked along the beaches in Haifa, not speaking, just walking and listening and feeling together, our hearts beating together at the wonder of living and serving in a new era of human oneness. He effectively and humbly discharged his many responsibilities. He worked closely, for example, with the Baha'i International Community's New York United Nations Consultative Office. He helped with the evolution of that office's service in international forums. His deep knowledge of spiritual and practical implications of the principles of the oneness of humanity greatly influenced the work of that office. He also worked closely with the evolution of the Baha'i Office of External Affairs, the visitor center where residents of that country and from abroad could come and see aspects of the Baha'i faith. I'd like to tell you another inspiring meeting I had with Glenford. It occurred in Haifa in 1993. It was after the conference of the Board of Counselors, Continental Counselors. He invited me to his office. He told me, Kaiser, the Universal House of Justice has asked me to meet with you to inform you that it would like to appoint you a member of the International Teaching Center. And he said it so very gently, aware that in some developing countries, mail, telegraph, and telephone services were often unreliable. So that we had that private, stunning meeting with me. Once again, I learned something of his deep kindness, his loving ways of encouraging me on. Yes, I benefited from 1976 from his loving ways, all the qualities that the House of Justice has mentioned and others have mentioned here, his humor, all of these things, they came in. And another point about his capable use of language, the House of Justice said. We had devotional meetings, weekly devotional meetings for those working at the World Center, and different House members would rotate, take turns presiding at the meeting. And when Glenford presided at the meeting, devotional meeting, he made many of us present lean forward a little when he informed the gathering of Baha'i activities in different places. He would announce, "I have some breaking news for you." Everybody would sit up a little bit. you know, or he would say, here's some breaking news for you. And he would give the information about what the Baha'i communities were doing in greatly expanding the cause. And I think all of you know, perhaps it has been mentioned, he taught at Howard University. He was an experienced writer and orator. Yes, you can find some of his writings, some of them published in the Baha'i World Order magazines. Yes, I think it's important. Yes, you may want to make your references and tell other people, the youth, and your friends and colleagues about it. Yes, brilliant articles. One I like very much, he wrote prerequisites. Yes, for rectitude of conduct is the one that I'm thinking of. He wrote about rectitude of conduct. He wrote about the quest of Shoghi Effendi to build a new world order. He wrote a very perceptive article about what happened to the double crusade. You'll be able to find these articles. They are worth reading because the House of Justice has called attention to his gifts, his intellectual gifts, and so forth, yes. And then there was a time that he was asked to read writings from the Baha'i writings at celebrations of Holy Day celebrations. And I know for a fact that the committee responsible for selecting readers of those passages from the Baha'i writings, they were particularly inclined to ask Glenford to read as much as they could some passages. And I remember that he read such passages such as these. I render thee thanks, O thou who has lighted thy fire within my soul, and cast the beams of thy light into my heart, that thou hast taught thy servants how to make mention of thee. I yield thee thanks for having caused me to turn wholly towards thy grace and bountiful favors. And I think that committee choosing Glenford so often to read these particular lines of reading, they were impressed like the members, all the other members of the House of Justice were. The sincerity in his voice, the awe in his voice, the wonder in his voice, the commitment in his voice to stand up there and announce, I yield thee thanks, O my Lord, for making me a servant of thy. And finally, I like to say, Glenford, a deeply loved, a deeply spiritual servant of Bahá'u'lláh, fully embraced from Baha'i writings this reality. Here are the words of Baha'u'lláh that he embraced. There is no deed nobler than service to the common good, the cause of God. No greater blessing is conceivable for a man than he should become the cause of the education, the honor of humanity. The highest righteousness of all is for blessed souls to arise and energetically devote themselves to the service of the masses, forgetting their own worldly advantage and working only to serve the general good. And this is what Glenford did. He forgot all about worldly advantages. I have no doubt in my mind that if he had chosen to pursue any of the professional fields that interested him and not devote himself fully to the service of the Baha'i faith, he would have succeeded. I have no doubt in my mind that he would have succeeded in any line of profession or activity that he would have wished to, because that was his style, to give himself over fully to what he embraced, to helping others, to accompanying others, to showing love to others. This was his style, and this was his dedication. Still, after all I've said, I'd like to tell you there was a special favor I wish I had asked Glenford. It was this, that he would give a special message to a special soul. You know, I said that Glenford and I, we had talked once about the family bonds. And he had told me about his parents, and he had told me about his Uncle William. And he showed me that photograph with him and his Uncle William. And I had told him also about my mother a little bit, about how my mother gave me and my siblings a spiritual orientation. My father did his part, but he was so busy out in the community, making his way, organizing activities against racial protests and all of that. So I think it was my mother that I often tell my children that gave me that spiritual orientation that led me to the Baha'i faith. So there was one little special favor I wish I had asked Glenford, and that special favor that I would ask him to give that special soul would mean that my family's prayers, hopes and aspirations for me, its labors for my spiritual well-being had not been in vain, for I had learned much from Glenford for my spiritual growth and my strivings to serve Baha'u'lláh. And that special favor was this: Glenford, if you get there, there meaning heaven, the upper kingdom, you know, that heavenly place where spiritual qualities are cherished and strengthened. That special favor I wish I could have asked Glenford, just in the closeness of our relationship, and was something that had to be asked a little bit in private, just he and I. Glenford, if you get there before I do, tell my mother I'm coming too. That's the favorite. Yes, I would want my mother especially to know that I had benefited from what I had learned from Glenford Mitchell. His exalted services call to mind these truths revealed by Baha'u'lláh. How great is the blessedness that awaited him that hath attained the honor of serving the Almighty. No act, the words of Bahá'u'lláh, no act, however great, can compare with it, except such deeds as have been ordained by God. Such a service is the prince of all goodly deeds. Baha'u'lláh goes on to say, it's the ornament of all goodly deeds. And this is why we are here, and believers around the world are honoring and remembering Glenford Mitchell as a spiritual servant of Baha'u'lláh. The story of Glenford Mitchell, a deeply spiritual servant of Baha'u'lláh, is this: blessed is the man that have turned his face towards God and walked steadfastly in his love until his soul hath winged its flight unto God, the most powerful, the ever-forgiving, the all-merciful. The story of Glenford Mitchell, I feel, as said by Baha'u'lláh, is this: blessed are they that have arisen to serve God, who speak forth wholly for his sake, and who return unto him. Thank you.
You know, the Baha'i faith was established in Jamaica during the first 7-year plan. And since that time, I have known about it.
Born March 3, 1935, in Brighton, St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, Mr. Glenford E. Mitchell went on to serve the Baha'i community of the United States with distinction for decades. First, as the director of the Department of College and Youth Activities at the Baha'i National Center. In 1968, he was elected to serve the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. A gifted writer, Mr. Mitchell's career in journalism and publishing was extensive and influential. He served in editorial roles for World Order magazine, Africa Report magazine, and Maryknoll Publications. He was also the co-editor of the book The Angry Black South, a collection of interviews with African Americans describing the social conditions in the southern United States in the 1960s. While earning his undergraduate degree in business administration at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, he was editor of the Shaw Journal, and he was inducted into the Alpha Kappa Mu Honor Society. Artistically, Mr. Mitchell was a brilliant photographer who sought to convey spiritual elements reflected in the natural world. He also had a deep love for jazz music. especially the rich trumpet sounds of Miles Davis.
The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Remember that statement.
Before graduating from Shaw University in 1960, Mr. Mitchell also worked alongside civil rights leader Ella Baker in the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC. He earned a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University in 1962 and went on to serve as a professor of English and journalism at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
You know, nothing thrills me more than to be in the company of youth and the young adults of our community. Our guardian in his monumental document, The Advent of Divine Justice, makes references to the youth. In one case where he mentioned them, he referred to them as those who can contribute so decisively to the virility, the purity, and the driving force of the life of the Baha'i community. And, listen to this, upon whom must depend the future orientation of its destiny and the complete unfoldment of the potentialities with which God has endowed it.
His passion for working with young people and guiding them toward a constructive purpose was a lifelong pursuit. These experiences were also foundational to his contributions to discourses on justice and human rights, and meetings with world leaders.
As you know, I have very deep feelings about the Iranian believers.
Well, over the last several months, steps have been taken to arrest Baha'is, the leadership of the Baha'i community in various localities in Iran.
What are the Baha'is in Iran doing about this oppression?
They have appealed to the authorities that exist in the country, because this is the Baha'i method. We do not subvert governments. We do not attack people violently. We believe in the rational approach in appealing to authority.
Mr. Mitchell was at the forefront of efforts to gain the support of the U.S. government in defense of the Iranian Baha'i community, whose members were being expelled from university, having their businesses seized, and being imprisoned and executed. In May of 1982, Mr. Mitchell testified before the House of Representatives Subcommittee on Human Rights and the Foreign Affairs Committee. In 1982, Mr. Mitchell was elected to the Universal House of Justice, the international governing council for the Baha'i Faith, which he served with tireless devotion until his retirement in 2008. This period was marked by the completion of the buildings of the administrative center of the faith on Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel, and the opening of the terraces as planned by Shoghi Effendi during his ministry.
His vision was always of the faith spreading all over the world and of everybody serving the cause. My dear friends, any person who believes in Baha'u'lláh, who has the love of Baha'u'lláh in his or her heart, can teach the faith. You don't need any method to teach the faith. What you need is the courage to do it. That's all. That's all.
Mr. Mitchell's clarity of thought and enthusiastic countenance galvanized individuals, communities, and institutions throughout North and South America, the Caribbean, and Africa.
Through the rapidly proliferating system of institutes and the energy being invested everywhere in area growth strategies, the Baha'i community has moved swiftly to capitalize on what has been achieved. However deep may be the gloom enveloping the world, the future has never looked so bright for the prosecution of Baha'u'llah's mission.
Well, dear friends, we'll continue the sweetness of this evening with further remembrances of the former House of Justice members, with concluding remarks by Bahia Mitchell. In the order they will be proceeding is Gustavo Carrillo, with remarks read on behalf of Upper Dunbar by Shastri Purushottama, followed by Faridun Javahari, and then Bahia Mitchell, at which time we'll have a closing prayer.
Aloha, friends. First, I would like to thank the National Assembly for the invitation to say a few words about Mr. Mitchell. It is not easy to express the respect, the admiration, and the warmth that all of us came to feel who had the privilege of interacting with Mr. Mitchell. Although it has been mentioned many times, I would like to repeat some of the remarks of the House of Justice that has evoked with precision his outstanding gifts, his penetrating powers of insight, his uncommon good sense, and his compelling commands of language, gifts that accompanied him throughout a life of service. Inspired by this message of the House, I would like to speak not so much about his achievements that has been mentioned, but the spirit that guided his actions in the fulfillment of his demanding responsibilities. The best way I found to do so is through a few anecdotes, simple anecdotes, gathered in conversations with people who know him closely, particularly from the Caribbean, including his native land, Jamaica. Just a few days ago, during the Auditorium celebration in Miami, I spoke with Jorge Pino, a Cuban Baha'i friend. When I asked him to share something about Mr. Mitchell, he offered a cherished memory he had carried for more than 40 years. In 1982, Jorge was one of two Baha'is whom the House of Justice invited to the commemoration of the Ascension of Baha'u'lláh in Haifa. They arrived after a journey full of difficulties. They spoke only Spanish. It was the first time they had left Cuba, and they assumed they knew no one in the Holy Land. As they were preparing to make their way to the ceremony, someone came to let them know that a gentleman had arrived outside to take them. They stepped out, surprised, and to their astonishment, they found themselves face to face with a member of the Universal House of Justice. It was Mr. Mitchell. They shared this little common language, and much of the ride passed in silence. Yet Jorge told me that despite that silence, they could sense with complete clarity the kindness and sensitivity of Mr. Mitchell towards two humble Baha'is, as they put it, who had come from a small island. They had assumed that they knew no one in the Holy Land, and yet here was Mr. Mitchell, who had come out personally to receive them. Had you known them before? I asked. Yes, he replied. I believe he was among those who came to Cuba with a group of traveling teachers many years ago. We arrived together at the conclusion that it was probably not a coincidence that it was precisely Mr. Mitchell who came out that day to receive them. He held deep affection for the early Baha'is in the Caribbean, including Cuba, for their steadfastness in the cause and for the role they had played in those formative years in the faith in the region. To recall a little history, in the 40s and 50s, Jamaica was the most established Baha'i community in the Caribbean, sending traveling teachers to neighboring lands. The young Glenford was part of this generation that helped kindle the light of Bahá'u'lláh revelation across the region. Together with his uncle William, that has been mentioned, and other believers from Jamaica, and later as a member of the National Teaching Committee, he used to travel to Cuba to teach the faith and assist the Friends in forming their administrative institutions. It was a simple gesture of solidarity between islands, yet its echoes would reach forward across decades in ways no one could have anticipated. One of the most memorable qualities of Mr. Mitchell was his profound humility, a humility that was neither pose nor protocol, but a genuine expression of his character. Dorothy White, a Jamaican friend, has shared this memory many times. The morning after the announcement of Mr. Mitchell's election to the Universal House of Justice in July 1982, she called him on the telephone. Allow me to be the first Jamaican to congratulate you on your election. She said. Mr. Mitchell responded without hesitation, in a voice full of bewilderment. Congratulate me for what? Dorothy confessed later that she knew at that moment she would never do anything like that again. Years later, when she herself had the privilege of serving in the World Center, he explained to her that he had not meant to be discourteous, but the news of his election had left him utterly taken aback, that he could not comprehend what was happening to him. How did I come to be elected to serve in the Universal House of Justice? This sense of wonder never seemed to leave him. I was told another story, that the person who managed the switchboard at the entrance of the seat would often see him arrive early. Before entering the building, he would spend some time looking out toward Baji in the distance across the Bay of Haifa. One wonders whether in those quiet moments facing the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh, he was still asking himself the same question, or still seeking the answer in prayer. Circumspect as he was, Mr. Mitchell possessed a deep sensitivity for recognizing who needed a word of encouragement or reassurance. My wife, Hale, and I arrived in the Holy Land in 2005, anxious and nervous, as was natural, having been called there at the request of the House of Justice. It was then that we came to know Mr. Mitchell closely for the first time. A single gesture of friendship from him and his dear wife, Bahia, was enough to put us at ease. They invited us for lunch and their home. We anticipated a serious conversation about responsibilities and perhaps cautionary words. What we found instead was something altogether different, an informal conversation among friends, full of warmth, in which they generally described the spiritual nature of the service in the Holy Land and answered all our questions about the practical details of life there. They offer encouragement in the face of our unspoken fears of not being equal to the trust placed in us by the Supreme Body. We will always be grateful for that warm welcome. In time, I came to understand that the invitation had not been simply a gesture of cultural hospitality. It was a sincere expression of his sense of community and of that sensitivity which moved him to draw near to whoever was in need. It was, in a sense, the very same sensitivity that had led him years earlier to go out to receive the young Cuban believers in Haifa. As all who interacted with Mr. Mitchell came to know, he lived in close communion with the sacred writings and the writings of the guardians, which were his permanent guide and which shaped his character and his vision of the world. And another friend from Jamaica remembers meeting him in 1982 at a reception held in his honor at the National Baha'i Center in Jamaica. She was a recent believer who has just been elected to the National Spiritual Assembly. Upon learning this, Mr. Mitchell drew her aside and spoke to her with both seriousness and warmth. He impressed upon her the importance of studying the Baha'i writings by herself and not to rely on others to understand them for her. He gifted her a small compilation entitled The Baha'i Life, and was at that moment passing through a painful time. Her family had rejected her because of her newfound faith. When she opened the compilation, she found words of the guardian that brought her deep consolation. Through a generous gesture of Mr. Mitchell, born of his sensitivity to the needs of others, the writings reach a searching soul at precisely the right moment and in precisely the right way. The Universal House of Justice, in announcing his passing, also referred to Mr. Mitchell as a deeply spiritual servant of Baha'u'lláh, as noted that he possessed a combination of rare qualities that answer to so many demands during more than a quarter century of service in the Supreme Body. And what these anecdotes reveal to us is something equally important, that behind the great orator, the scholar, and the member of the House of Justice, there was a human being of disarming simplicity, of genuine humility, and of constant sensitivity to our ordinary people. It is moving to reflect that from that boy, in Kingston, memorizing the guardian's letters at his uncle's home, accompanying his uncle and other believers on their teaching journeys across the islands. There would emerge a soul who would dedicate his entire life to the cause of Bahá'u'lláh, and who would do so always with the same simplicity that never left him. This is an aspect of his legacy that will inspire many who come to know his story and his remarkable life of service. May his noble soul rest in peace in the Abha Kingdom, accompanied by all those who, like him, have contributed to the advancement of the faith in every corner of the world. And may his example continue to light the path of those of us who had the privilege to know him.
This is a message from Mr. Hooper Dunbar, which he asked me to read on his behalf. My dear friends, although I am unable to join you in person, my heart is fully present with you in the hallowed house of worship as you gather to honor the memory of Glenford Mitchell. I find myself reflecting with profound gratitude upon the 2 decades we were privileged to labor side by side as members of the Universal House of Justice. In those chambers where the forces of light and darkness are weighed in the balance, his presence was a steadying influence, a man whose keen insight and remarkable practicality were ever harnessed to a rare mastery of language. From the early years when the sacred writings kindled a flame in his heart, through his years as Secretary of the National Assembly of the United States, and more than a quarter century of consecrated service on the House of Justice, Glenford embodied a rare fusion of qualities. He saw the vision of a new world order founded on justice and the oneness of humanity, not as abstract ideal, but as living reality to be built day by day through patient consultation and selfless action. In the quiet moments between sessions, one sensed the creative energies released by the revelation at work within him, illuminating paths that others might have overlooked. Now, as his noble soul is welcomed with joy into the eternal realm, we are reminded that the work that we shared continues, animated still by those same forces he served so faithfully. Let us then deepen our own certitude through the writings, that we may become ever clearer mirrors, reflecting the light that he so brightly bore. My heartfelt prayers ascend for his dear wife, Bahia, and his daughter, Teresa, and for all of us who feel this loss. May the progress of his radiant spirit inspire us to ever greater endeavors in this luminous age.
Mr. Javahari, I can't see the light so bright. Aha, welcome.
Friends, it's 10 to 10. So I won't tell you, or I won't repeat what so beautifully and ably others have said about what a great individual and soul Mr. Mitchell was. I thought once I keep hearing, oh, everyone is saying what I wanted to say. I thought I would just come and be very brief and tell you maybe we could also reflect on what can we learn from his life. The message of the House of Justice and really the remarks of Bob Henderson, I think made it clear that, to me, that Mr. Mitchell clearly and consciously decided that by believing in Baha'u'lláh, he made the decision to allow Baha'u'lláh to recreate him, for his potentials to be really used in service to the faith. As the House of Justice said, to meet many needs. Well, by studying the message of the House of Justice, which I think is a very good idea, when we read it, if you say, but I don't have all these abilities, many of us may be correct to say so. But whoever we are, we do have capabilities that can meet the needs of the faith. If not worldwide, nationwide. If not nationwide, region-wise. And if not, definitely every one of us in our own clusters. I think that, and if we do that, imagine how happy Glenford would be. And I think that is really what I will say. When the House of Justice says his uncommon characters and all the abilities met many services, many needs of the faith, it's in reference to the 26 years he was a member, but no question that they also talk about a life of service and the 14 years that he was a Secretary of the National Assembly. In particular, I just want to mention the persecution of the Baha'is that was beautifully also mentioned in those slides. If you watch the 1982 congressional thing that we saw the video here, you will see how all those qualities that the House of Justice mentions came to meet the needs of the faith at that time. By convincing, by opening the door to a path. You know, I remember actually this Glenford Mitchell told me myself, he said, Feridun, when we received the letter of the House of Justice in 1979 that you should go to the State Department, he was saying, I asked myself, do the Baha'is go to the State Department? And he was mentioning this to make a point that that is where we started. And this is our National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, one of the strongest pillars of the Universal House of Justice. And at that time, there was a handful, not more than 6 or 7 National Assemblies who had been asked to do so. And so therefore, you could see how this National Spiritual Assembly and Glenford, by its secretary, were in the forefront of this opening for the progress of the faith. 40 years later, friends, that effort not only defended the Baha'is of Iran, but built a foundation for now, I wouldn't know the number precisely, but more than 100 national spiritual assemblies in the world, based on those learnings, have now reasonable, at different levels, relationship with their governments. And defense of the faith is only one, and I would say not necessarily the largest, but one of their services. And working on the facilitating to participate in the discourses of society is one of them, to the extent that in the 9-year plan, the House of Justice says this, the community building, discourses of society, and the social action are defining the 3 areas of our activities. Look at the blessings that Baha'u'lláh gives to sincere, devoted efforts of individuals who decide to dedicate themselves to be used as a channel. So that we can all, we may not be able to be Glenford, but we could be using as a channel. As I said, at least I can say in every cluster where we are. Anyway, so galvanized, when the House of Justice said he was galvanized by the writings of the Guardian, of course we know, and we know how many thousands of people were moved by his talks and writings. But what I liked about it, when I listened to him, is that I actually observed that after decades of doing the same thing, assisting the Baha'is to understand the vision of the Guardian, when he was talking, he himself was moved. What affected me was his own, you could see, he wasn't just talking to the Baha'is because he wanted us to know. He was moved himself. And this is a character that I have personally seen in some of the Hands of the Cause of God. And I think it's something that we can all learn, to be interested with every breath that we take, be interested in the progress of the faith in our clusters and in the world. In other words, I think Glenford took it upon himself that the progress of the cause of God is my business. It is the preoccupation of my mind in the field of service that is offered to us. And so imagine if every Baha'i in every cluster feels that the progress of the cause in that cluster is my preoccupation. So, and lastly is his manner of talking. And you know, he was very gentle, but he was also very sharp and impactful. In 2003, when at about 11 o'clock at night, we were going to bed, and the telephone called, so I rushed to the telephone, and I picked up the phone. It was Glenford. He said, Feridun, you have been elected to the Universal House of Justice. The first meeting is tomorrow morning at 9:30. May Lord be with you. Put the receiver down. I had no word to say. He didn't have the time. He just put the receiver down. And so I don't know for how many minutes I was quiet. It was long enough that Vito thought I must have received the terrible news that I can't go to tell her. Anyway, but what was interesting, it was his voice, and you see, I realized he has told me everything that I need to know. May Lord be with you. That was the manner of his talk. And just to also mention the Baha'i community in Canada, I'll tell you a story that is, I've heard it in Canada from the friends. Apparently, two Baha'i brothers, twins, very dedicated Baha'is, go to, very dedicated, very active, but they themselves would say that they are impulsive. So they visit Haifa, and they have had the privilege, I don't know the occasion, but they have had the privilege of visiting some of the holy places in the company of Glenford Mitchell. When they go to the room of Abdu'l Baha, one of the twins see the binocular that belonged to Abdu'l Baha, and he just goes for it and picks it up to see the surrounding. And now Mr. Mitchell is watching. As soon as he does that, the other brother interrupts. The brother pulls his hand and says, "Let me see it." And and Mr. Mitchell, who was, I've written it down just to make sure that I use his word. Mr. Mitchell, is silently watching this, and he finally breaks his silence and gently but firmly says to them, "I never would have thought of doing that myself." And the friends talk about the constructive and positive impact that these few words of Glenford had on this youth. I think these are the things that we can learn from Glenford. Thank you.
Friends, on behalf of Glenn and our family, we offer our heartfelt and ever-abiding gratitude to our supreme institution, the Universal House of Justice, to our beloved National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, two institutions that Glenn revered and tirelessly served. We are also deeply grateful to all of you who have traveled here and taken the time to honor Glenn. If Glenn were here, he would smile and say, "What's all of this? It's not about me. Get on with the plan." Thank you.
O my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions, verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses. Dispel their sorrows and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount.
So, dear friends, thank you all for the sweetness of this occasion. I think we all know the fruits of the Spirit when we hear it. That's absolute proof of the cause of God, the Master has said. But to inspire those fruits in others, as Mr. Mitchell has done, that is absolute proof with heart and soul, and that's what we've heard this evening. You are welcome by your National Spiritual Assembly to the foyer where there are goodies and treats, and we can continue to reflect on the evening. Allah